Hi, my name is Mason Rick with AutoQuip Automation, and today we will be rebuilding the Poppet valve using the Poppet valve repair kit. The Poppet valve repair kit can be purchased on our website or by visiting one of our local distributors. We will start by disassembling the Poppet valve. You're going to remove the cap from the top of the Poppet valve, and you can put that off to the side. With that, your piston spring will come out, and you can put that off to the side. Then you're going to push your piston through the Poppet valve, exposing the locking nut indicator and the piston retaining nut. Then take a 5/16 wrench and a 1/4 inch wrench, or a small adjustable wrench if you have one, and loosen the locking nut indicator from the piston retaining nut. You can put that off to the side. As well as your piston retaining nut. Then take your 7/8 wrench and your adjustable pin spanner wrench and remove the valve body from the piston body. When you do this, your packing spring will come out, and you can put that off to the side, and your packing and packing washer will come out. The packing will then be discarded, but your packing washer will be kept. You can then remove the shaft from the valve body and put that off to the side, as well as the valve body. Then take a small screwdriver and push the piston out of the piston body. Take an 1/8 inch Allen wrench and remove the 2 plugs from the side of the piston body. These 2 plugs will be discarded. Then take your 5/16 wrench and remove the 5/32 air elbow from the side of the piston body. This will be kept, and as the piston body will be kept as well. There's a Teflon O-ring on the valve body and 2 Buna O-rings on the piston. Take a small screwdriver and remove the O-rings from the piston. You want to keep your piston, but the 2 Buna O-rings can be discarded. Then, using your small screwdriver, remove the Teflon O-ring from the valve body. Keep the valve body, but you can discard the Teflon O-ring. Next, we are going to remove the plunger end from our shaft. Using 2 9/32 wrenches or 2 small adjustable wrenches, remove the plunger end from the shaft. You can discard the plunger end, but you want to keep the shaft. It might be a good idea to take a small screwdriver and abrasive brush and clean off some of the excess Loctite from the threads on the piston shaft. Now you're going to go into your Poppet valve repair kit and empty out the contents. You should have 2 plug screws, a new packing, a new plunger end, a new Teflon O-ring, and 2 new Buna O-rings, as well as your instructions and part list. First, we're going to take our new plunger end from our Poppet valve repair kit and our piston shaft. Take a little bit of red Loctite and apply it to the threads on the piston shaft. Then take your plunger end and screw on to the end of the piston shaft. Once it is fully finger tightened, take your 2 9/32 wrenches or small adjustable wrenches and tighten the plunger end onto the piston shaft. It is important that you don't over tighten over 90 degrees. Now take a little bit of petroleum jelly and apply it to your shaft. You can then insert the shaft into the valve body. Take your new packing from the Poppet valve repair kit and slide it down the shaft. Your packing washer and packing spring. You're going to then take your two new Buna O-rings from the Poppet valve repair kit and put them on your piston. Then take a little bit of petroleum jelly and apply it to the two O-rings. Then with your piston body and piston, insert the piston back into the piston body and push down until it's fully seated. Then take your two sub-assemblies and tighten them together. Use your 7/8 wrench and your adjustable pin spanner wrench to make sure they are fully tightened together. Take your piston retaining nut and finger tighten onto the end of the threads until it is flush with the end of the shaft. Then push your shaft back through. To calibrate the depth of your Poppet valve, you are going to either need the Poppet valve calibration block or the Poppet valve calibration gauge. To use the Poppet valve calibration block, going to put your Poppet valve in, and thread it in until the valve body is fully seated up against the bottom of the calibration block. Then make sure your plunger end is fully seated in the calibration block and finger tighten your piston retaining nut against the piston. It is important not to over tighten, as this will then pull your plunger end off the bottom of the calibration block. Then take your locking nut indicator and thread onto the bottom of the piston shaft. It is important that you don't over tighten this as well, as this will pull the plunger end off the bottom of the calibration block. You can then pull your Poppet valve out of the calibration block, push your shaft back through the Poppet valve. Using your 5/16 wrench and 1/4 inch or small adjustable wrench, tighten the piston retaining nut and locking nut indicator together. Then we're going to push our shaft back through the Poppet valve and put it back into the calibration block to make sure that we are still fully seated up against the bottom of the calibration block. As we can see here, our plunger end is still fully seated up against the bottom of the calibration block. The process for the calibration gauge is fairly similar. You want to push your piston through the Poppet valve and make sure it's fully seated up against the calibration gauge. And then you're going to go through by pushing your shaft back through and tightening your piston retaining nut and locking nut indicator together. Once you have tightened them back together, you're going to push your shaft back through and double check with your calibration gauge to make sure it is fully seated up against the bottom of the calibration gauge. Then take your piston spring and put it over the locking nut indicator and piston retaining nut and tighten your cap over the piston spring onto your piston body. You will only need to hand tighten this, and you'll feel when it comes to a stop. Then taking your two new plug washers from the Poppet valve repair kit and an 1/8 inch Allen wrench, put the two plug washers into two of the holes on the side of the piston body. Then take your 5/16 Allen wrench in your 5/32 air elbow and put it in the last hole on the side of the piston body. Lastly, we're going to take our Teflon O-ring from the Poppet valve repair kit and a little bit of petroleum jelly and put it on the bottom of the valve body. Our Poppet valve is now completely rebuilt and it will need to be tested. It is important to remember that you don't put the Poppet valve back into use until 24 hours so the red Loctite on the plunger end can dry. You're going to take your 5/32 air line and put it into your 5/32 elbow. And when you apply air, you want to make sure that your piston shaft moves up, and then when you turn off your air, it goes back down. You're going to do this a couple times, remove your air line, and your Poppet valve has passed the test. You're going to want to wait about 24 hours after completely reassembling your Poppet valve so that the red Loctite is completely dry.